They want to coerce women into having babies. They're so obsessed with this just idea of, oh yeah, barefoot and pregnant women in the kitchen cooking food. It sounds comical, but that's very true. You'll see so many videos of this on social media. Oh, women nowadays, they have OnlyFans, they have all this Instagram stuff, they're showing their ass everywhere. They need to get back to, traditional roots. They need to just have children and get a husband. There's no inherent issue with not living this traditional lifestyle that was set out for them by a bunch of fucking people who believe in some unfounded religion and who want it to go back to where the beating of the wife, such as in like the 1950s, was seen as a family matter and not as something that the police should be involved in. The Trump and GOP manufactured abortion nightmare happening in this country is being put on full display once again in the case of Kate Cox. That is exactly what we will be going over today. The Texas Supreme Court on Monday overturned a lower court's ruling that would have allowed a pregnant woman to get an emergency abortion under the medical exception for the state's near total abortion ban. Kate Cox's fetus was diagnosed on November 27th with trisomy 18, a genetic abnormality that usually results in miscarriage, stillbirth, or death soon after birth. Attorney General Ken Paxton had urged the Texas Supreme Court to quickly step in after District Court Judge Maya Guerra Gamble at a hearing in Austin last Thursday issued a temporary restraining order allowing Cox to have an abortion. Paxton warned in a letter sent shortly after Gamble issued the order that it did not shield doctors, hospitals, or anyone else from prosecution or potential civil liability for violating Texas's abortion laws. So yeah, absolutely disgusting how the Republicans just say, oh yeah, we can't let this go unchallenged. We can't let people get reproductive health care because that's all they want is control. They don't want you to be able to do what you have to and what you want with your own body. They don't want you to be able to, even make healthcare decisions that could save your life or save the baby from any kind of suffering. Like this says, the fetus was diagnosed with trisomy 18, a genetic abnormality that usually results in miscarriage, stillbirth, or death soon after birth. Why do they want babies to have to go through this, pain and suffering? Okay, and I saw a comment on social media recently that said, oh, well, let your baby live for a few days. Why is it your decision? Oh, what fucking baby wants to live for a few days in suffering and agony and then die, okay? And it's not a matter of you saying, oh, well, they should get that chance or that's in their interest. No, that's objectively not in their interest because we as sentient beings, we have two functions. We have negative, phenomenological mental states and positive phenomenological mental states. So, to say that a baby living for a few days and having overwhelmingly negative experience is somehow in their interest literally just makes no sense. You'd be saying that the suffering would be somehow good to the fetus, okay? That literally is objectively false, okay? Suffering is not good to the thing that is experiencing the suffering, empirically. And tautologically, okay? That's literally the definition of a negative phenomenological mental state is something that you don't like and you don't like by nature. So why do you want to subject babies to this? It was never about babies, or sometimes they say it is, but ultimately they just want control. They want to control women, they want to control you, they want to control men, they want to control everyone in the most petty of matters, like for example, who can play in sports or not, who can go to the bathroom, and, all these conspiracy theories and claiming that people are child molesters without any evidence whatsoever. And then, the most serious matters possible, such as, getting reproductive health care that otherwise can make it so, as we'll further talk about here, could make you infertile and all of these other, just terrible things that could happen to you. The High Court, whose 9 justices are all Republicans, said in its unsigned opinion that a good faith belief by Damla Carson, a doctor who sought to perform the abortion and sued alongside Cox that the procedure was medically necessary, was not enough to qualify for the state's exception. Instead, the court said Carson would need to determine in her reasonable medical judgment that Cox had a life-threatening condition and that an abortion was necessary to prevent her death or impairment of a major bodily function. That was from Reuters. So, and to be clear, we're reading off of the Flip Side, which is basically an organization that will email you once every weekday, usually. And they will go over one specific issue, and they'll go from left-leaning sources and publications, and then from right-leaning sources and publications. So when I'm making these videos, I'm going over a myriad of sources and a myriad of different viewpoints, and that's what we do in these videos. These are more podcast style videos, more, relaxed, not so much edits are in the what you're hearing. Make sure to subscribe, like the video, and make sure to watch these to the end, because these don't get pushed out by the algorithm as much, just because people don't really like to watch videos like this as much as maybe my more polished content. So from the left criticizes the Texas Supreme Court's decision along with Texas's abortion law. The scenario that Cox and her doctor are trying to avoid is one where her uterus literally tears itself open along her C-section scar during contractions. It is not an uncommon complication in pregnancies where a woman tries to give vaginal birth after a previous C-section, which can be even more likely if multiple C-sections have previously occurred. If not swiftly treated, it can lead to catastrophic blood loss and force doctors to perform a hysterectomy to save the woman's life. If that does not count as a risk of death or substantial impairment, nothing does. Yeah, absolutely just fucking insane. If Texas's elected officials had their way, Cox and her family would have spent the next 20 or so weeks living in abject terror. Her doomed pregnancy would have felt like a time bomb strapped around her torso. This is a woman who'd hoped to welcome a new child into the world, only to find out that there would be no baby showers, no crib to build, or nursery to paint. Instead, she's been left to wonder and dread if the next ache or pain or the next muscle spasm was the one that could end in tragedy. And at every step of the way, the state of Texas threatened to jail anyone who tried to help her, from Matt Ford from the New Republic. It's just so absolutely disgusting how Texas Republicans, specifically, but Republicans across the country, like for example, in Texas in September of 2021, there was a state law banning abortion after 6 weeks, which is before many women even know they're pregnant. And, this was in anticipation for Roe v. Wade being struck down, but it was before it was struck down because it was struck down in June of 2022. And the way they sort of, manufactured this law to not be stricken down by Roe v. Wade, which basically set the barrier at the viability mark. So when the fetus would be viable outside of the woman, then, states can place restrictions on abortion. It went before that, this Texas bill did, but it went into effect because it was structured in a way that allowed private citizens to enforce the law rather than government officials. So, for example, people could just sue doctors and providers and anyone who aided and abetted a woman in getting an abortion. Think about that. They could sue them civilly. They could get money back. They could rob them for what they're worth because they help someone to get reproductive health care. Absolutely fucking disgusting. And then, once Roe v. Wade was overturned, complete abortion ban. No, week limit. There's only exceptions for if, the health of the mother is at risk, which apparently, with everything that's been said so far, oh, well, your vagina, ripping and, all of these just horrible things that makes you wince to even think about. Oh no, that's not a serious health impairment. You becoming infertile, that's not a serious health impairment. The baby suffering for multiple days and dying a miserable death, oh, it doesn't matter. It's absolutely disgusting. No exceptions for rape and incest either. It's just fucking disgusting. Carson was quite clear that it was her reasonable medical judgment that Cox must receive an abortion to save her life or to prevent other health consequences described in Texas abortion law. She simply didn't use the magic words reasonable medical judgment. Apparently that's sufficient reason to deny Cox an abortion in Texas. No doctor will feel safe performing an abortion under these conditions. The state's top law enforcement officer threatens them with prison and financial ruin. The state Supreme Court sits on cases for days for patients who may need an abortion immediately to save their life, and then the court will deny relief because it claims the patient's doctor failed to use the right magical words. From Ian Milheiser from Vox. Cox's lawsuit is far from the only attempt to clarify or challenge abortion ban exceptions. The plaintiff in Kentucky has filed a class action seeking permission for an abortion. Lawsuits in Texas, Tennessee, and Idaho argue that if state exceptions cannot be more broadly interpreted, then the laws themselves are unconstitutional. In some states, courts have already weighed in on the constitutionality array of specific exceptions, with more cases likely to follow. Yeah, exactly. Like, that's the issue, is that even if you make exceptions for, rape or incest, or exceptions for the life and health of the mother, who's to say a far-right MAGA prosecutor won't say, oh, well, I think you're lying about this being medically necessary. I don't believe the doctor, just like how they don't believe doctors and medical professionals on vaccines, just like how they don't believe climate scientists on the overwhelming scientific consensus that climate change is real and humans are the main contributor to it. Who's to say that these far-right scumbags won't just say, oh, well, I don't believe you and we're going to prosecute you anyway. We just want control and we don't care that it's necessary to save your health or life. We just want to throw you in jail, or they want to throw the medical providers in jail, that is, because many Republicans don't actually believe that women, or they don't create the laws to put women in prison for an abortion. Although, some states have proposed stuff like this. I believe in South Carolina, there is a proposed bill to make a woman who gets an abortion, makes it so they can be charged with murder, which could actually carry the penalty of death. So women could actually be getting murdered by the state for getting reproductive health care, life-saving reproductive health care even. That's why any restriction or ban on abortion is problematic. And people will say, oh, well, or they'll say, oh, Republicans should turn this around on Democrats. They're the extremists. They want abortion on demand up until, the day of birth. Well, in some ways, yeah. And, oh, my cat. In some ways, yeah. And that's because once you put any restriction on abortion, you are then opening the door to medical professionals being intimidated and scared into not performing life-saving care, okay, and fleeing states where this is in place, which increases the maternal, morbidity rate, which increases, the likelihood that many people who will need an abortion, who can't travel out of state, who are also being targeted by, for example, Republicans in Idaho, who don't want them to be able to legally leave the state to get an abortion, even though that's obviously it would have to do with interstate commerce, so that would be a federal issue and a state literally cannot legislate on that. That'd be unconstitutional and illegal. But nonetheless, they want to do all these things. They want control. They want to just make life a living hell for so many people, and part of it is because they want to coerce women into having babies. They're so obsessed with this just idea of, oh yeah, barefoot and pregnant women, in the kitchen cooking food and all this. It sounds comical, but that's very true. People will say, and you'll see so many videos of this on social media, oh, women nowadays, they have OnlyFans, they have all this Instagram stuff, they're showing their ass everywhere. They need to get back to, traditional roots. They need to just have children and get a husband and that sort of thing. And it's like, there's no inherent issue with not doing that. There's no inherent issue with not living this traditional lifestyle that was set out for them by a bunch of fucking people who believe in some unfounded religion and who want it to go back to where, the beating of the wife, such as in like the 1950s and such, was seen as a family matter and not really as something that the police should be involved in. It's like, it's just absolutely disgusting what they want to do. It's all, and part of it is a fetishization of that sort of state of being, of women being subordinate to men and under their control and to conform to their will. That is what Republicans want, basically. And that's also part of Project 2025, which I've talked about in these videos. The same message emerges from these cases, whether plaintiffs like Cox win or lose, and perhaps especially if they fail. The exceptions Dobbs brought into effect do not work the way many Americans might have guessed, and may be designed not to work for patients at all. When the state's interest in fetal life clashes with real health threats faced by women, patients will always find themselves on the losing side. From Mary Ziegler, the Los Angeles Times. Kind of like Werner Ziegler from Better Call Saul. From the right supports the Texas Supreme Court's decision, arguing that it was legally correct. Texas law allows abortions when the mother has a life-threatening physical condition aggravated by, caused by, or arising from a pregnancy. It does not allow abortions based on major fetal abnormalities. Oh my God. The doctor who joined Cox's lawsuit believed that she should be able to have an abortion, but would not say that in her reasonable medical judgment one was needed to save her life. Okay, so you think that if it's absolutely needed to save her life, it's okay, which then again, it has issues with that. That won't always be enforced, as I've said. But it's like, why do you hate babies so much? Why are you lying and saying you're pro-life when you want babies to be born and suffer in agony and die within a few days? The court was thus not given adequate evidence to conclude that an abortion would qualify for the medical exemption, but it left open the possibility that a doctor actually giving her a full examination might come to a different reasonable medical judgment. The court also explained that the relevant judgment is a medical rather than a legal one. A doctor examining Cox would have been able to abort the baby without getting any advance approval from a court if she thought Cox's life was threatened. If the doctor's judgment was reasonable and genuine, the law would protect it. Yeah, so you think the fucking doctor is gonna trust these Republican fucking scumbags to abide by the law when their cult leader is Donald Trump, who has 91 criminal charges, who tried to overthrow an election he lost by 7 million votes because all they care about is power? Yeah, that's the narrative, and that's what us Democrats and any fucking sane person in this country believes, is that all Republicans care about is power. Why should we trust that you're going to not try to prosecute us if we were doctors and medical professionals? Why would we trust you and think that you're not going to prosecute us if we give them this care? And life being threatened, I'm sure the doctor would conclude that yes, her life was threatened. As what did they say? The scenario that Cox and her doctor are trying to avoid is one where her uterus literally tears itself open along her C-section scar during contractions, okay? And that could very well risk death, which is what that says, okay? So it's like the doctor's not going to perform this and just say, oh, well, it was needed to save her life, because like this is proving, that could very well be contested. And the doctor can be, jailed and made found liable for this. They don't even want Trump found liable for trying to overthrow an election he lost by 7 million votes and trying to illegally get back into power, stealing hundreds of top secret classified documents on his way out, leaving them in unsecure places like his bathroom, having some, who was it? It was like a Russian speaking Ukrainian fugitive, was at Mar-a-Lago under a false name. Who's to say whether she got classified documents? There was a very serious, binder of classified intelligence concerning Russia that has recently been uncovered to be missing. Yet, and they want to shield Trump from all of these things, but oh, God forbid a medical professional help a woman get an abortion. It's just absolutely fucking disgusting. The court is obviously correct in its reading of Texas law. The law, in her judgment, is also right in thinking that even human lives with limited prospects should not be deliberately taken. Oh, limited prospects should not be deliberately taken. Okay, yeah, I'm sure that baby wants to suffer and die. And that's from the editors of the National Review. Trisomy 18, or Edwards syndrome, is not always a fatal diagnosis. Oh, not always a fatal diagnosis, so let's subject a baby to that. It's a troubling one that can result in pregnancy complications, birth defects, and a stillborn birth. But trying to paint it solely as destructive to the child and the mother is wrong. How do we know? Because families have chosen to ignore a diagnosis or a warning and have allowed their child to go full term. Former Senator Rick Santorum and his wife Karen made this choice in 2008. Their daughter Bella just celebrated her 15th birthday. I mean, yeah, that can happen, and you could say, oh yeah, well, they could come out and they could, be fine. And I actually work with adults with disabilities, and do I think that, all of them should have been, aborted once they were actually further along in the pregnancy? No. But the fact is, it's not just that, it's also the complications surrounding it that could happen to this woman and the unique situation that she is in. At least from my understanding, this is not a case where it is likely that the fetus will end up growing into a healthy human being who will just live out the rest of their lives and not be seriously affected and suffer and die from this. Okay, that what it's saying here and what the doctors are saying is that this baby is seriously sick, and this wouldn't be made such a big deal if it wasn't. You think that this woman just wants to abort her baby just because they have some minor disability? No, it's obviously much more serious than that, but they don't want to believe doctors, and they don't want to believe in their judgment. They want to question their judgment and force women to bend to their will. The knee-jerk response is that the mother or the child will not thrive if they have a stark medical or cognitive conditions. In a culture that values rights above all else, even another's life, many in the medical profession immediately opt for abortion. Here's the conversation that needs to be had. Why do we wish to discard children, especially potentially special needs or health challenged children, rather than do all we can to help them survive and thrive, no matter how long that might be? Jennifer Oliver O'Connell from Red State. Yeah, look, motherfucker, that's not your fucking decision, okay? That's up to the mother. And do I think that, like I said, with late term abortion, I think it's immoral to have an elective abortion that is that far along if it does not threaten the life of the mother or the life of the baby, but that's not the case here. Many also know, quote, like all complicated pregnancies, Cox's is unique. Some women can carry trisomy 18 pregnancies to term with little physical risk, and others cannot. Is this to say the state Supreme Court got it wrong and that Cox is in the latter category? Not only am I not a doctor, but I'm also not a lawyer, so of course I won't make that judgment. Cox has reportedly left the state to get an abortion elsewhere, bringing a sad situation to a sad end, but other women and other men who simply can't decide which side of the debate they fall on are listening. Women are listening when crass pro-lifers accuse Cox of callously wishing to kill her baby. Women are listening when these same advocates ignore Cox's concern about her physical safety, and worse, when they write off uterine rupture and a hysterectomy as minor inconveniences. Tiana Lowe Dosher, Washington Examiner. Wow, so that was actually pretty based, I guess, statement from Tina Lowe Dosher, however the fuck you say that. This whole thing is just absolutely insane. I'd want to talk for just a second about Utah's abortion laws, which is what I'm the state that I live in. So Utah's SB 174, passed in 2020, bans abortions full stop except in cases of rape, incest, or the life and health of the mother, or if two physicians who practice maternal fetal medicine both determine that the fetus has a defect that is uniformly diagnosable and uniformly lethal, or has a severe brain abnormality that is uniformly diagnosable. So it sounds like, and by severe brain abnormality, they're only referring to a mentally vegetative state. So, if the baby is, gonna just suffer and die within a few days, I think it's kind of ambiguous whether, the courts and maybe the Utah Supreme Court would uphold, for example, a restraining order allowing a woman to get an abortion. It's not exactly clear, and like I said, that's the problem, but that is caught up in court. The base judge, placed an injunction on that. It's caught up in the courts. So now Utah's previous law allowing abortion up to 18 weeks is still in effect, but now they're going after clinics. So for example, HB 467 would require abortion to be performed in a hospital and would prohibit licensing abortion clinics after May 2nd, 2023, allowing licenses to certain clinics based on certain standards. That law remains on hold as well. So, and that's from the Deseret. So, yeah, oh, well, if we can't ban abortion, full stop, basically, we're going to just make it so, hospitals that usually won't, provide abortions outside of, extremely excruciating circumstances. Oh, well, if we can't do that, we're just going to stop abortion clinics, period. And then after that, they came up with this other atrocity to, get around the courts and to try to intimidate the courts into, not providing the checks and balances that they're made to check. They want to prevent this because they are a right-wing echo chamber, and I think Utah's particularly bad with this. And so House Joint Resolution 2, which failed initially, so they had to be narrowed down, allows for legal entities like the Utah Attorney General's office to request review of court orders and require court decisions to explicitly state why they granted the injunction and whether there were serious issues with the law or in the case. So if a judge or a circuit panel, like in the case in Utah, blocked a law from going into effect, now the Utah Attorney General office and other legal entities can say, oh, well, we want you to review that. And it doesn't, it doesn't necessarily say that the court has to reevaluate it, but it's all in an attempt to just intimidate these people, to intimidate these judges and these people who just want to look out for the well-being and life of women and just people in this country, who might be denied reproductive health care, who might be just denied the right to privacy and the right to terminate a fetus, which might not even be sentient yet. They might even have the consciousness of a rock, so no consciousness. They would never even know that they were ever, conceived in the first place. They basically never existed. What's the difference between being aborted before you were ever sentient, ever felt pain, ever, even had any kind of inkling or experience whatsoever? What's the difference between that and just your mother never deciding to have you in the first place? Virtually nothing. Okay, there's no meaningful difference there. So if you're gonna ban elective abortion before the emergence of sentience, which goes as far as 24 to 28 weeks, the very like liberal estimate, I guess you could say, for when sentience arises is somewhere around 12 weeks. Even before that, the vast majority of abortions take place. It's like, if you're against that, it's like, how are you not against women just not having babies? And it appears very likely that most of these Republicans are just against women not having babies because they want them to fulfill their, traditional role. As I said, they're just absolutely sadistic maniacs. These abortion bans are absolutely disgusting and harrowing and are abhorrent to the interests of sentient beings. But what's also abhorrent to the interests of sentient beings is being tortured, murdered, enslaved, and mutilated in so many ways. Which is why I made this video detailing whether or not the president can ban animal agriculture and free animals from their chains.